As I mentioned earlier, the second speaker of our plenary this morning, Dr. Stanley Vollant, made the best of efforts to be here with us physically today. Unfortunately, for urgent family matters, equally significant, the world starts with the family. He has to stay home, but his spirit and his wisdom has been shared with us in the form of a video. Dr. Vollant will speak in his one of his native tongues, French. Our colleagues, the interpreters, will interpret for us, and you will hear it in the auditorium in English language. So your understanding and forgiveness if the visual does not always match the audio. But firstly, I'd like to introduce our second speaker, Dr. Vollant. Many, if not all of you, are familiar with his biography. On the list of biographies of the keynote speakers on our website and the Facebook, and there has been information that has been provided for you. So I won't bother you with the details of that, but you know that his world and his achievements is a reflection of the inequities for Indigenous peoples across the world. It was not until 1994 that Dr. Vollant became the first Aboriginal surgeon born in Quebec, Canada. Since then, he has been a surgeon, but walked his life in four major quadrants. The first quadrant, academia, collecting the knowledge of the West in the form of medicine. The second quadrant of being a healer, collecting the wisdom and the healing messages of his ancestors. The third quadrant of making sure that Indigenous knowledge, Indigenous health, Indigenous rights are at the forefront of the minds and hearts of not only his Indigenous communities, but in Canada and beyond. And the fourth, but equally if not more important quadrant, the well-being of the first world, the family. And so, Dr. Vollant is a man of wisdom, both in the Western sense and the Indigenous sense. He practices medicine. He is an academic, teaching at the same time. He follows the footpaths of his ancestors. And when we spoke with him about our conference this week, he was even more animated when he knew there will come a time when the voices of Indigenous peoples and their knowledge hopefully will be considered at an equal level with other knowledge systems around the world, in the form, at least, of an Indigenous statement that hopefully our conference will endorse on our final day. So a man who walks both at the physical plane of existence and also at a realm of spirituality. Without further ado, I would like to welcome Dr. Stanley Vollant, and please put on the video. Please put your hands together.
Oui, good morning, bonjour. Je suis très heureux et très honoré d'être parmi vous.
Honored to be with you today. I am talking to you live from the north of Canada, Montreal. It's a very cold day today. Today, I would like to talk to you about my story, my nation, that's all the nations, the First Nations in Canada. And then I will tell you about the walk I undertook as part of the Meshkenu project before discussing the issue of health determinants affecting Canada's Aboriginals people. Storytelling, or tales, is the traditional way of communicating among Canada's First People. This is the way I was lucky to find out more through my grandparents about my culture, to find out how rich my history was through the stories told by my grandparents in the tent. So let me tell you a story. And this won't be a conventional scientific conference.
Donc, diapositive numéro 3, je
I am an Innu from the Summit, which is a community located 400 kilometers north of Quebec City, the capital city of the Quebec province, on the banks of River St. Lawrence. In the Summit, the river stretches 40 kilometers wide. The water is salt water there, and we have sea mammals such as seals, whales, and there is a lot of fishing as well. Here is my village and a view of the St. Lawrence and the Psammet River. I was born in a nursery in 1965. At the time, unmarried women were not allowed to give birth in hospitals. They had to go to a nursery. As far as First Nations women were concerned, such as my mother, where the child conceived in sin, the child had to be put up for adoption to sell their soul. My grandfather was a trapper, a fisherman, a hunter, decided to adopt me. So he went to the community's general store where he would sell his furs. And he asked for an advance on his next hunt, and he came to get me from the nursery. At the age of 3 or 4 days, I was adopted by my grandparents. They took me to my village. I was raised in a very traditional way. My grandparents hardly spoke French. They couldn't speak English, they only spoke Innu. I grew up in the forest where I learned how to hunt and fish, living in a canvas tent. The jacket I am wearing is a traditional canvas jacket that was given to us by the community store in the 1800s, and it was used as a trading commodity. I was raised in a tent, and I learned about our culture from my grandparents. Later on, at the age of 6, I went to school in my community where I learned to speak French. Unfortunately, at that school, there were still many colonialistic aspects. We were forbidden to speak Innu in our own school. We weren't allowed to speak the language of the savages. So we were told only outside of school were we allowed to speak that language. So for me, education was a way to move forward, for sure, but also an aspect of the settlers trying to dominate us. To help me through life, I had several role models. My mom, surely, was one of my models. She had wanted to go to university, but Aboriginals were barred from university by the authorities till 1965, or they had to sign an emancipation document. My grandfather was a great model of strength and courage, and he said to me, "Son, you will go to school, you will go to university to learn the knowledge, science, the language and the laws of non-Aboriginals in order to defend our land, which had been stolen from us." Dams were built by the provincial authority without paying us our due. Our way of life was broken by non-Aboriginals, so go to school, learn their language and their law to defend our culture. There were also great chiefs in our community that inspired me a lot to go to school and become someone who's able maybe to change the deal in the future. So this is when I went to Quebec City to study secondary school and then to university. And then I entered the Montreal School of Medicine in 1984, where I graduated as a surgeon in 1994. I was the first Aboriginal physician or surgeon in Quebec. I was awarded several honors by my village, my nation. I got married in 1994. I had 2 children from this first marriage before getting a divorce in 2003. These were difficult times. In 2005, I had a child, a boy called Xavier. named after my grandfather, who had passed away in 1982. He was hit by a drunken non-Aboriginal, yet the law wasn't really fair at the time. One dead Aboriginal was just one less Aboriginal. So that's the reason why I named my son after my grandfather in 2005. In 2006, 2007, 2008, I was the director of the Aboriginal program at the Ottawa University, the first Aboriginal director at the Ottawa Medical University. My partner left me, and this was the beginning of a slow descent into depression in 2007. In August 2007, I tried to kill myself. A failed suicide attempt, but today I'm very glad I failed. I often say that in the darkest and the longest night, the sun always ends up rising, and I've experienced this firsthand, and today I'm very happy, 12 years down the road, to still be alive today. It's a gift. Life is a gift. A difficult gift, the most beautiful one nonetheless. Death will come and take us soon enough, no need to look for it. This leads me to a conference I attended in 2007 in New Zealand. I was invited to talk about traditional Aboriginal knowledge, and upon arriving in Rotorua I was exhausted by my depression, still depressed. So there I am in Rotorua, and this friend of mine says to me, "Stanley, go for a run, you'll feel better. I mean, you're clearly struggling with jet lag." So I started running. I was so tired, I didn't even have enough strength for a 5-minute run. Yet, as I was running through Rotorua, feeling the energy from the earth, the geysers on site, I ran for 3 hours and on, and while I was running I had a dream that I was going through some far-flung foreign land. I also had a dream about the presentation I was holding the next day, so it really was a life-changing experience that took me to Spain in 2008 to walk the Compostela walk, an 800-kilometer pilgrimage. While I was walking these tracks, I had another dream on the last day of the walk. I had spent a few days in the hospital due to an infected leg. Something very serious, but I was able to get over it. And the last day of the walk, I had this dream in which elders were talking to me. And I was talking to young Aboriginals about the importance of having a dream, of believing in themselves, being proud of who they were. And elders would come and give me back my history and my culture I had lost through the education process I had been through. And upon waking up in the morning, I told myself, what a beautiful dream. It's like watching a TV show. When I was walking that morning, someone said to me, that wasn't a dream you had, it was a vision. And you will have to walk the path in your vision, and you will find the answers you seek when walking that path. I thought he was a bit mad. I mean, the talking track is not something easy to believe in. As a surgeon, very down to earth. And yet, when I came back to Canada, this dream haunted me for 2 days, and in 2 years. In 2010, I started on the Meshkenu journey through Quebec and Ontario, meeting young Aboriginals in order to inspire them to believe in their dreams, in their skills, their potential, and to be proud of who they are, but also to learn from the elders, learn about the culture and my history, which I had lost. In 2010, I undertook this walk. It took me close to 6 years. I would walk 3 to 4 weeks of walking every year, so I could still work as a surgeon and take care of my children. So you could see some of the photos of my walk on the way to slide 73. I walked through the country with several thousand people. I visited Quebec's 11 nations and met lots of people and learned a lot about myself, about First Nations, and also to know more about health determinants on Aboriginal populations. I learned also in a very good way about the impact of boarding schools on the current health situations of First Nations. I walked 600 kilometers overall, and I visited 35 Aboriginal communities. That's over 30,000 people, 20,000 young people in schools, 10,000 people I walked and talked with. So these are rather telling figures. This is a map of Quebec with all my itineraries in this 600 kilometers. These are the outcomes. Books and comic strips. Books were written for schools, trying to inspire them to believe in themselves and develop their full potential. Later on, a documentary was released about my training. It is available on the Radio Canada website in French. Who we are, 110,000 people of Aboriginal origins. There are several languages and 615 communities throughout the whole country. So clearly, there's great diversity there. And when I talk to non-Aboriginals, I often tell them that we are very different. We have some bonds, some things in common, but we are as different as European countries can be. The French and the Greek might all be Europeans, but they are clearly different. They don't share the same history, even though they live on the same continent. Likewise, Canada's First Nations are highly diverse. However, we have gone through the same ordeal such as colonization, in the same way that Maori or Australia's Aborigines have gone through similar experiences around the same time. Our nations were made to settle down by colonial powers. In the 1800s, we were sent to boarding schools for indigenous people. To understand the current health situation of First Nation people, you need to grasp the impact of such boarding schools on indigenous people. They caused several trauma in young people attending such schools. We're talking physical, mental, and psychological trauma. These people were taken away from their families, thus losing the opportunity to experience their parents' love and affection. They were subjected to violence from the institution and violence from the peers. They became bitter and violent children tend to raise their own kids in a violent way, leading to a transgenerational transfer of violence. I spent 3 or 4 days in a boarding school back in 1976, and let me tell you that I asked my mum to get me out of there, otherwise I would never have become the man I am today. What you need to understand is that such impacts have passed down from generation to generation. And this explains the current issues with indigenous people. Aborigines in Australia, New Zealand's Maori, that have had to deal with similar situations throughout history. Looking at social community and social economic data of First Nations, it was interesting to point out that Canada's indigenous population is very young. Half of this population is under 22 years old. So we're talking about very young people compared to the aging non-indigenous population. One of the main issues of the First Nations is diabetes. has been on a rising trend for a few years now. It's 3 to 4 times higher. It can be explained by an increasingly sedentary lifestyle and a shift from a traditional lifestyle based on hunting and gathering for subsistence to a shift towards readily available food with no need to move to get it. My grandparents were constantly on the move, but nowadays people get around by car or off-road vehicle. Another impact of this sedentary lifestyle is a move towards a carbohydrate-rich diet, which wasn't there 30 to 40 years ago. So we also need to take into account all aspects related to colonization and boarding schools. A friend of mine from Alberta once said to me, well, I'll say it in English, because that's how we said it back then.
What Lebanese was in the past. Lebanese started to appear 1 or 2 generations ago, and it appears since they have removed the swiftness of our lives.
Ce que cela signifie, c'est que make population dependent and taking all the oil to live makes them sick. So this is a holistic association taking into consideration health determinants. Suicide rate in the First Nations people is also very high, 5 to 6 times higher. And in Nunavut, among Northern Canada's Inuit, it is 20 to 24 times higher among young people. These are very significant issues with far-reaching impacts on Indigenous people. The impact of boarding school can still be felt to this day. In Canada, around 25,000 young Aboriginals are in the child welfare system, and that's 10% of all young Aboriginals in the child welfare system. And this is actually a continuation of the boarding school system. Worse even, as they are adopted by non-Indigenous families, thus losing the cultural bearings, their language, and most of the time they experience very significant mental health, suicide, and violence issues once they become adults. These are very current issues that have to be addressed. And that's the reason why, through the work I undertook, through my action with young people, I am trying to tell them that we have great potential. Walking 600 kilometers, I found out how brave my grandparents were, how my ancestors were able to cover such great distances. And I had logistical support from my team, yet I thought it was very, very hard. I came face to face with death on several occasions, and I kept thinking about my grandparents, and I admire them even more now. And I'd like to say to young people, be proud of your ancestors. Grandparents, they were great men, athletes, to have survived such a lifestyle and climate. So we need to find inspiration and the strength that lies within us and say to young people that they have all the potential, they need to fulfill their dreams. You just have to believe in it. Perseverance and resilience are alive within us. So let's move forward and develop our potential, being proud of who we are. I think this is the solution for First Nations. Take this resilience, this pride in our past, to assert ourselves in the eyes of the Canadian population, and also ask the Canadian government to solve land claim issues to provide First Nations with the services they require. In recent years, large-scale reviews showed how poor First Nations were. It is the duty, in my opinion, of the Canadian government to make up for past mistakes, for historical mistakes, and to give back First Nations, their pride and their place in society. Young Aborigines have great potential today, and if we allow them to fulfill this potential, it will be an asset for the entire country. The Canadian government spends billions of dollars to develop tracts, to mine diamonds and other minerals from the ground. Well, they should spend just as much on developing the potential of these young people, so they could contribute to the well-being of all Canadians. And this should be done, could be done in all countries throughout the world, developing young people's potential. In conclusion, health determinants have a far more significant impact than healthcare on large populations. And I believe that giving back education and access to economic and cultural development of Indigenous people would enable them to give back to the whole population in Canada, as well as in all countries in the world. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Vollant. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Yes, it's very clear, despite the technical glitches, the personal is the political. Your story resonates not only with Indigenous, but also with non-Indigenous trailblazers who see the order of things in the world today as not the natural order, as cited in the Mount Report 2008. They are human constructs and must be addressed. And as in the words of Saint Mason, we do not walk to the future. We do not just take the future that is offered to us. We create, we make the future that we want us to be. Dr. Vollant, inspired by the wisdom of your ancestors, galvanized by the challenges that are present in your life, but inspired by your children and the children of your children, your future, you lead the light. Thank you again for sharing your wisdom with us. Please put your hands together again. Dr. Vollant.